Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Marian Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. Today I am interviewing Dr. Bill Rawls, and I am super excited for this interview. He is a trained allopathic medicine doctor, and he has gone on his own health journey, and now he is a leading expert in cellular wellness and how that impacts chronic illness, and if we can focus on that and how we can get well. He has an amazing book that we're going to talk about. And I highly recommend it. I'm just going to say that up front. His book was amazing and very easy to read and understand with a lot of science-backed information. Dr. Rawls, thank you so much for joining us today. I would love for you to introduce yourself, give your amazing background, and then what led you from allopathically trained medicine to integrative and holistically trained as you are now.
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to be here. It's great. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. I grew up in a medical family. I'm fourth generation doing this, and used to go on house calls with my grandfather, followed footsteps, went into medicine. But there were things about practicing medicine, seeing people on medical floors, that were just not being helped by the medical therapies. They were just being stuck in a state of managed illness. And so I ended up going into OBGYN because it was dealing with health and life and bringing life into the world. And it was really wonderful. Except 30 years ago, it came with this rigorous call schedule that every second to third night and every second to third weekend, I was on call for labor and delivery and emergencies in the hospital. And, when I was in my 30s, I could do that. I could drive through not getting sleep every second to third night and all the other stresses and busy practice and just busy life. And I did fine. But as I got into my late 40s, I started losing the ability to sleep. But on top of that, everything in my body just started breaking down. Arthritis, heart issues, brain, neurological, everything. My whole body was falling apart. I didn't understand it. I went to numerous specialists. They couldn't help me out and was really struggling. You ended up with a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. And if you identify with that, you know that about the most that will get you is drugs to ease the symptoms, and that's all. And so I kept searching and found that I was carrying the bacteria that caused Lyme disease, and thought, wow, this is it. I can take antibiotics and get well. And I got sicker instead of better with every round of antibiotics, and realized that this thing we identify as chronic Lyme disease isn't really what people think it is. And it really underscores a model of how all chronic illness comes together. Ultimately, I turned to herbal therapy, natural therapies, diet, all of the restorative things that I could find, and I got my life back. But the herbs really made more of a difference than anything else. So I spent the last 20 years of my life and career really understanding why and what was going on in my body, and how everybody can learn from that, not just people who are struggling with chronic Lyme disease, but virtually everybody on the planet.
I find that people in the integrative world, we have a health crisis that leads us to realizing that the modern medical system is limited in what it can do for us. It's great for acute care. We are in a car accident, we need a tumor cut out, things like that. It's fantastic, but it does fail us in the chronic illness and really healthy maintenance world. And
Yeah.
I love that you were so open-minded as to explore the other side, quote unquote, of medicine and are open to that. So, on your journey, when did herbs come into play, and how have you learned to, or what led you to using herbs, and how do they impact cellular wellness? That's what your book is all about, is cellular wellness. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the cells and why does that impact disease?
Yeah. Well, when I first started using herbs, I was using herbs specifically because I thought they had antimicrobial properties that were killing the bacteria that was making me sick. And I've since come to appreciate that all the pathogens associated with Lyme disease and beyond are low-grade pathogens. They typically don't cause acute illness. And what happens is we pick them up through tick bites and all kinds of other ways. But it's not just tick-borne things. Every time we started putting things in our mouths when we were babies, all through our lives, intimate contact with other people, we're picking up microbes. And most of them are low grade. They don't have a high potential to make us sick. Most of the time, we don't even know that they've entered our body, but they have the potential of invading our cells, our brain cells, our heart cells, our joint cells, and becoming dormant. And then when we're under stress later, they reactivate. And that's what
Mhm.
happened to me. I picked these things up when I was a child. It wasn't an acute tick bite that made me sick. And it wasn't until I started recognizing that these things were present and had reactivated, that's when I really started paying attention and understanding what the herbs were doing. They weren't just killing microbes or killing a microbe. They were rebalancing all of these things that were in my tissues, putting them back in the box. But they were also protecting my cells. And that's key. Because when you look at health, good health is healthy cells. Our body is made of cells. And when you look at any symptom, it's all a function of cellular stress. When our cells are stressed, then we start having symptoms, we start feeling bad. Anything, imbalanced hormones, you can root that to cellular stress. Inflammation, you can root it to cellular stress. Absolutely everything. So that's kind of the cornerstone of understanding the difference between health and sickness. So it's yeah, that's where we start.
So, for those that maybe are new to this like chronic illness world and new to alternative medicine, or the original medicine, whatever we want to call it, right? So this is going to sound really kind of out there and like, wait a second, like herbs, those little plant things can actually do something, but also the concept of cells, and that our cells are really the root of it. How did you learn about that herbs are the balancing and protecting of cells? How did you learn that that was really what they were doing versus killing microbes? Because I feel like we're still in kind of this, instead of a pill for every ill, it's an herb for every ill,
Yeah.
right? And obviously that they always have their place, but at the root of it is the cells. How did you learn that that was where it's at?
It wasn't obvious in the beginning. I mean, it took me 20 years to really get to the place that am now. And I look at it now and go, it's so simple. Why couldn't you figure that out a long, long time ago? But we're trained to treat illness as dysfunctional processes, right? So all illnesses can be broken down into two components. One is dysfunctional processes, and dysfunctional processes are hormone imbalances and inflammation and things that are going wrong in the body. If somebody's healthy and well, they don't have these dysfunctional processes. That's the root of illness. It's a key component, but something else is driving those processes. So I started asking the question a long time ago, like 20 years ago, what's driving chronic illness? And thinking, wow, this is going to take a long time to figure out. when we look at acute illnesses, we do really well because the cause is obvious. You break your leg and the broken leg is the problem, and you set the leg and the person gets well. When you look at chronic illness, it's considered multifactorial. It's not one factor, it's a lot of factors coming together. But when you break that down, and I started looking, piecing out, well, what are these factors? So diet was an obvious one. A lot of people were eating a bad diet even 20 years ago. It was pretty obvious that my diet was not perfect, and that was contributing to my illness. And then I started looking around, well, what else is out there? And toxic substances in our environment. That's a big one. And it's becoming bigger. But I could find some scientific evidence to say, yeah, this was a big variable that contributed to chronic illnesses. Mental stress, which drives anxiety, but more importantly, not getting sleep. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Inactivity, and the other side, the flip side of that, I call that this category physical stress, trauma, overexertion, that sort of thing. But the opposite of that is inactivity. And then the fifth is microbes. And we really understand acute, highly virulent microbes that make us very sick. We know more about Ebola than we do all these other low-grade things that I'm talking about, because it's a real killer. We pay attention to those kinds of things. But it's these low-grade things that we're exposed to all of our lifetime. So those 5 factors are really, I've found, well, if we can change these things, then we can do a lot of good by reducing illness. And yeah, if you do that. And I kept working with it and asking, okay, let's dig deeper. Why? What are these things doing? Well, if you take it down to the smallest functional unit in the body, it's a living cell. So our body is completely made of cells. Everything that happens in the body is cellular. So whether it's your heart beating, your thyroid hormone being produced, your brain impulses firing, it's all done by cells. So you can think of cells as little microscopic machines. Every cell is an independently functioning unit. And each of those cells has very specific requirements. And if you have a machine like your cell phone or your car or something like that, you're going to have fuel and the right kinds of things to make it work. Same with your cells. So it turns out that what your cells need to be healthy mirrors those stress factors almost identically. Your cells need the right nutrients, really important. Your cells need a clean operating environment that's not contaminated with toxic substances that could inhibit their functions. Your cells need downtime to recover. And that's that really important sleep that we get overnight. Our cells are recovering from working all day. Cells need good blood flow, but also protection from trauma. That's why we wear seat belts and have airbags. And fifth thing is they need protection from these low-grade microbes, because that's the arch enemy. So you put those things together, and that is the simple equation for wellness right there. You give your cells what they need, and they'll do all the work for you. You don't need to know about all the complex processes that their cells are doing. You just need to know how to keep your cells healthy. It's that simple. And, so once I really understood that model, wow, is it powerful?
Yeah. What I've found in coaching is people love complicated. For some reason, they feel like if it's that simple, it's almost like they feel insulted.
Yeah.
But it really, really is. And I also find that people, while they're definitely blown away by how simple it is, but then they also feel like, well, there's just no way I can get more sleep, and there's just no way I can be less stressed. So give me that herb, give me that pill, give me that vitamin so that I can keep running myself ragged, but get better. Right.
I think that's it right there is we don't want to change what we're doing. And what I learned is by making all the changes that I have made and continuing to refine that, I'm living at a very, very high level of health. And here's the message. You can't get well by treating dysfunctional processes. You must get to the cellular stress that's driving those processes. That's the only way that wellness is possible. And outside of that, using the medical route, you're going to live in a chronic state of managed illness. So you might get by, you might live longer, but you're not going to live at your best life.
And that's what it is. Most people want to live their best life.
Yeah,
And this is us telling you that you're going to have to make some changes, but the changes are simple and powerful,
they
right?
are.
So now that we've established that, I really do want to dive into herbs because they are so poo-pooed. Like it's just it blows people's mind that to think that herbs could actually do something. So I really would, because you are an expert in them, I would really love to dive into that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll start out by making this statement. Herbs have the highest potential to promote and intensify the healing capacity of your body than anything else on earth, period. And I think it starts with people looking at herbs as weak versions of drugs. It's like, yeah, the herbs might do a little bit, but they're not going to give me the potency I need to really solve this problem, stop this symptom, whatever. And here we're talking about apples and oranges. They're just not the same thing. And it took me a while to get around to this also. So what you're getting with a drug is a chemical substances that's designed to block some kind of dysfunctional process in the body in some way. And what that can do is lessen a symptom or possibly slow progression of an illness or kill cancer cells. But it's not going to do anything to restore the health of your cells because drugs have zero capacity to reduce cellular stress for a chronic illness. Zero. Maybe some with certain acute illnesses, but in chronic illnesses, it's pretty close to zero. We're not doing anything there. That can have value though. I mean, if you're really sick, slowing progression of the illness, stabilizing things, cutting down on those symptoms, that can really help move you forward, but it's not going to make you well. So when we look at an herb, we're talking about something different. So a drug, any drug, antibiotics or any other drug, are single chemicals that have a single purpose. When you take an herb, you're basically borrowing the plant's chemical defense and regulatory system. So plants are multicellular organisms just like we are. And when you go outside of that and look at medicinal mushrooms, mushrooms are multicellular organisms just like we are. So when we take that herb, we're taking this complex spectrum of hundreds or even thousands of different chemicals that have purpose, that have even a certain amount of intelligence. And this took me a long time to really piece out because you're not going to find that information looking at old traditions of herbal medicine, which have value, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and others. They're wonderful, but they don't really go down to what the herbs are doing at the cellular and biochemical level. So, what we're doing when we take an herb is we're borrowing that very complex defense system that is protecting our cells from stress, from eating too much carbohydrate, from free radicals, from bad fats that we eat, from toxic substances, from radiation that we're exposed to. The plant is making these things to protect its cells, but when we take that plant, we're getting all of those benefits. Those benefits include bacteria, viruses, protozoa, yeast, but not just specific ones, a full range. So we're not talking about one chemical like an antibiotic. We're talking about this broad spectrum of chemicals that do have well-documented antimicrobial properties. And very interestingly, every single herb has been documented, every one I've studied has been documented to have antimicrobial properties. every single one. But here we're not talking about the same thing as an antibiotic. Within 10 days of using a potent antibiotic, you are going to start disrupting the normal flora in your gut and generating antibiotic resistance to that single chemical. So it's a big problem. So you've got about 10 days to solve the problem. And they work really well for fast growing bacteria like a pneumococcal pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
But these reactivation of microbes that we see, and I'm associating this with virtually every chronic illness, you're not getting to them. You're going to hit your normal flora a lot harder. So the really fantastic thing about the herbs, which it took me a long time to figure out, is they selectively suppress pathogens, but they don't kill your normal flora. In fact, herbs I've found balance your gut a whole lot better than probiotics or anything else that you can use because they suppress pathogens, but they don't disrupt your normal flora there. There's also no evidence that antibiotic or resistance can occur to herbs in the same way we see with antibiotics because it's not one chemical, it's hundreds or even thousands of chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also getting regulatory chemicals from the plant. So one of the things about our cells is our cells have to communicate with each other. For us to work as a unit, all the cells have to be in constant communication. And that's done by this vast network of hormones and signaling agents. And our brain is constantly monitoring what's going on outside of our body and making adjustments to the cellular functions within our body. Well, a plant is a multicellular organism and it has to do that too. And it's using a lot of these same chemical messengers. So many herbs that we call adaptogens, have chemicals that actually help balance our hormones and balance our stress hormones, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these wonderful effects coming from the herb that are protecting our cells. So when our cells are stressed, they burn more energy, they burn out their mitochondria faster, we age faster.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stress your cells enough, then you become chronically ill. When you reduce that stress, your cells can recover and regenerate. That's what healing is the ability of cells to recover and regenerate after stress. So by protecting our cells from stress, herbs are actually promoting healing at a very direct level. Drugs have a lot of value, but they have no capacity to promote healing. We're very dependent on the body. So drugs don't promote healing, herbs do promote healing. Healing takes time. So sometimes you need the drugs in the in-between time, but if you're looking for the drugs to solve the problem of symptoms and that sort of thing, it may take weeks or months and people get impatient. So sometimes it's a combination of both. But if you're doing the herbs, and more than that, if you're doing the herbs every day anyway, just as part of a good health program, you may never need the drugs, right?
That's the goal.
Yeah.
That is a wonderful explanation of herbs and how they work. And they're not an overnight solution, but they are a long-term solution. And I love that you have a balanced approach to pharmaceuticals have their place. And if you want to be healthy, you have to go beyond them. I know a lot of people are going to be asking this question. What's the best way to take herbs? Do I have to take them all of the time? What about tinctures, powders, teas? There's all these things out there, and people are going to be wondering, well, what's the best one? And is there a best one?
Well, you have to grow them in your yard, cultivate them, process them, and get them. No, that's really impractical. I would love to say that we should all be doing that, but I grow various herbs in my garden, but I can't depend on that. And to get the quantities that we really need, that concentration of the chemicals that we call phytochemicals that give us the benefits, commercial products are really the way to go. And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong because they get on the internet, they read about this hyped up product that sounds wonderful, and then they take it and it does nothing. And what they've done is, that particular company, and I would say, half the companies selling herbs out there are putting all their money into the marketing, but not putting very much money into the product to maximize their their profit potential. So a lot of people are getting products that just don't have very much of the chemistry of the herb in them. So when you look at commercial preparations beyond teas, teas are nice. That's a great way to enjoy an herb, but it's hard to get the concentrations of the phytochemistry that you need. So the first way that people usually come upon an herb is with a powdered, dried capsule. And basically, what you're getting in that, your basic, if you go to a health food store and you're getting something that doesn't cost very much, like 15 or 20 bucks, what they're doing is they're taking the herb, drying the whole plant and crushing it up into a powder and putting it in a capsule. And what you're getting is mostly fiber, not much of the chemistry of the plant, and it's probably going to have very, very little benefit. So whole herb powders are fair at best. And I generally don't waste my money on them. The next level is tinctures, and they're different concentrations of tinctures. So tincture is one step up. So they're taking the plant, putting it in water and alcohol, and the water extracts some range of the chemicals and the alcohol extracts another range. So you're pulling all of that chemistry of the plant out, and then you take the plant parts out and throw them away, discard them. So those tinctures can be, some of them are really potent, and that's a really nice way to get herbs. I do a fair number of tinctures. The disadvantage is you got to take a lot of the tincture, which means a fair amount of alcohol, and some of the herbs are really bitter. So the third thing you can do, and it pretty much looks just like the first option, is what's called a powdered standardized extract. So if you look on a bottle or look on the website, what you're going to see is the scientific name of the herb, and you're going to see standardized to such and such phytochemical ingredients. And so they'll pick a key phytochemical in there. So what they're doing there is taking a water alcohol tincture, spraying it on a surface, drying off the water and alcohol, and collecting the powder. So you're getting just pure chemistry of the plant. So typically a standardized extract is going to be on average 10 times more potent than that whole herb powder. So even though it only may cost twice as much, it's 10 times more potent. So pretty much most of what I'm using to get the kind of phytochemistry to really make a difference are these standardized extracts. That makes a huge difference. Now I use different kinds of things, but that's kind of my standard go-to. Getting the concentration really does matter, and that's when people really start seeing an effect. Also, combining herbs, it's not just one herb. Trying a little bit of this or a little bit of that is fine, but something that herbalists recognized a long time ago is when you combine multiple herbs together in a formula, anywhere from 6 to a dozen herbs, you're going to get a much more intense effect that is much greater than the single herbs individually. And that really makes an enormous difference. So I'm taking a lot of phytochemistry every single day. If that sounds even the slightest bit threatening, it actually is very much links us to our ancient past. And you probably are well aware of this. When you look at humans, for hundreds of thousands of years, we ate a foraged food diet.
Mm-hmm.
And that foraged food diet was about 2/3 plant matter and 1/3 animal matter. But what they were doing was eating wild plants, wild berries, stems, leaves, roots, all the different parts of the plants. And with time, they found out which plants were good and which ones weren't. But wild plants have a lot of intense phytochemistry in them. Average human was eating up to 500 different plants in a year compared to what we do now, maybe a couple of dozen.
Right.
But with these wild plants, they were getting intense concentrations of these phytochemicals. So when you look at what is most missing in our diet today, it's really this phytochemistry that's missing, because our cultivated food are raised to generate calories, not protective phytochemicals. So we've trained a lot of that out of our food plants.
Mhm.
So to me, it's only natural that we should be getting this intense phytochemistry in our diet every day. I take a handful of capsules, usually once a day, sometimes twice a day if I'm under any kind of stress, just to continue to protect my cells and to keep me healthy.
That's incredibly helpful because I know that again, the marketing is powerful out there and it's like, where do you even begin? Right. So let's say, and I don't know if you can go into somewhat specifics, but are there, like, again, I'm thinking like ashwagandha. I'm thinking there's some that like, oh, these adaptogenic herbs are great for stress. And then, but it's like, what if people are dealing with something else? What would be a good resource to learn about the differences and maybe find those combinations that will be most helpful? Is it your book? Are there practitioners that specialize in it? Where can people begin to start their research in this?
Yeah, well, I fortunately using herbs is pretty easy. I mean, you can get into trouble, but it's kind of hard to get into trouble. It's like nobody would just go out and try a drug because technically all drugs are poison. I mean, even things like ibuprofen and aspirin, if you eat too much of that, it's going to make you sick. So when we look at the herbs that I'm referring to, herbs that protect our cells and balance our stress hormones, adaptogens are in that class. There are other ones that have stronger antimicrobial properties. These herbs are pretty safe. You would have to take a lot of them to actually for them to hurt you. So you have a pretty good safety margin. I've learned an awful lot just by trying a lot of different herbs and looking and seeing what kind of effect they had in my body. I would never do that with a drug. When we look at herbs, plants, or mushrooms that we use for these medicinal purposes, I'd like to look at a range all the way from on one end, you would have food plants and culinary herbs, to at the other end, herbs that have or plants that have very, very strong, potent drug-like properties. And at that opposite end, I generally stay away from those things. You know, those are the things that I would rather use a drug that I can control the dose rather than a plant that might have some undesirable effects that would be less safe. So I'm staying down in a safe zone that includes herbs that predominantly protect cells and they don't have strong drug-like properties. So a lot of the things that people are looking for, those strong drug-like properties, I want to stop that symptom. Don't look to herbs for that.
Hmm.
Go talk to your doctor and get a drug if you feel like you need something like that. Look to the herbs as a place to prevent those problems from ever happening and restore normal, promote healing to get you where you need to do. So there are a lot of really nice herbs. You mentioned ashwagandha. That's exceptionally good for balancing stress. Like all herbs, ashwagandha does have antimicrobial properties for these low-grade pathogens. Rhodiola is another favorite adaptogen of mine. That one is really nice for physical stress. I used to take it when I went skiing out in the mountains because it would help prevent altitude sickness. Turmeric, everybody's heard of that one. It's an exceptionally good anti-inflammatory herb. That's another one just to add on the list for most people can enjoy that one. Outside of the herbs, mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps. You hear about more and more about mushrooms.
Hmm.
Getting, we have a different name. The chemicals in the mushroom are called mycochemicals instead of phytochemicals, but still it is providing some of those same benefits. The mushroom is producing these substances to protect itself from stress factors, from microbes. And so when we take that, we're getting those beneficial effects. Reishi mushroom is found to have some of the most potent anti-cancer properties on the planet.
Wow.
I have never, every herb that I've researched so far, I've been able to find evidence of anti-cancer properties. So, two big ones: antimicrobial, anti-cancer. All these cell protective properties protect us from all of these kinds of conditions. So, not waiting until you have a problem, taking them as part of your lifestyle can be very important. Or if you do have an issue, taking them to help you heal your body and overcome that problem can be really, really important.
Thank you so much for clearing that up. I've been in this natural alternative world for about 15 years now, and I've seen some wildly inaccurate sharing of, like, oh, don't take a pharmaceutical when you can take this herb, on that really potent process. And people have gotten hurt from, because it is wildly all over the place in dosage and all of that. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure they still do have their place, but it's something that you want to go to an expert for versus the adaptogens and these in the middle herbs, the
Yeah,
the mushrooms and all of that are truly protective. What I love about herbs is you can take them whether you're in a place of health or in a place of disease, right?
yep,
And they help modulate on either end of the spectrum. If you're really high in one, it can help bring you down. If you're really low in one, it can help bring you up. But at the end of the day, it's protecting the cell and giving the cell what it needs to run as efficiently as possible.
yeah, that's it. There are words, amphoterics, immune modulators. It is that idea that your herbs bring you back to normal. If you're deficient, they bring you up. If you're over exaggerated, they bring you down. And it's because they are normalizing and protecting those cellular functions. So no matter what we're talking about, it always gets back to cellular stress. And if you're doing things to reduce cellular stress in your body is going to normalize. Your cells are constantly trying to find normal, to function at an optimal level. And if you're helping your cells do that by taking herbs, by eating a good diet, by getting a decent night's sleep and exercising, you're doing all the things to live with normal health.
So I have a question, and I know a lot of people are going to ask this because my audience are in the middle of chronic disease usually. How long did it take for you to come back to a more optimal state of health from when you were sick with the, catch-all fibromyalgia to when you felt good again? How long did that take?
Yeah, it was a process. And I think that's important for people to recommend. By the time I started herbs, I was in really bad shape. I had had a lot of evaluations. I mean, I was worried about MS. My heart was skipping beats every second to third beat, and I lived with chronic chest pain. I could walk, I could ambulate, but still my joints hurt continually. So I had a lot of issues. And I got lucky. I happened to read about an herbal protocol for chronic Lyme disease. And it was a leap of faith that was driven by total desperation that I started taking enormous quantities of herbs all at one time. I mean, literally handfuls of capsules of these standardized extracts. And I started noticing a difference within 3 months. But healing is a give and take process. And I would say, you know, as that learning journey continued, it took me about 5 years to reach total 100% health. Because a lot of that was, frankly, ignorance back then. It's kind of like, well, this is therapy and you do therapy and then you stop the therapy. So I would get 70 or 80% better, and all these herbs I was buying, would run out, and I would stop taking them, and then some stress would come along and throw me flat back on my feet, and then I'd be like, okay, I got to do the herbs again. I'd do the herbs again. And this went on, up and down for years. And I finally reached a point that said, these things aren't hurting me. I feel better when I'm on them. I'm just going to take them continually. And part of that is a refining process because I found that some herbs were better for some situations than others. And I kept working it and working it until I had achieved the level of health that I wanted to, that I considered normal health. But that's been 15 years ago. I have been taking herbs continually, not missed a day since that time. I'm 67 and I'm still out doing things like kite surfing and things that I thought I would be giving up at age 50 and don't intend to stop anytime soon. Now I'm aging. You know, we can't get past that. Aging, what aging is the gradual loss of functional cells that occurs through time. We peak out our cell count at age 20, and at that point in time, we have 5 to 10 times more cells than we actually need. By age 40, we've cut through half of those reserves, and our cells don't have as much function. That's why most athletes are done by age 40. So at 67, I've lost a lot of cells over time, but I'm keeping the cells I have healthy so that I can do more than most average 67-year-olds, and I don't have debilitating symptoms that are weighing me down.
Thank you for clarifying that. Again, we are in this culture of you take antibiotics for 10 days, you feel better. And it's really hard to break through that mindset of you have to take care of yourself every single day, and people get overwhelmed with the perfectionist mindset.
Yeah.
But like we said, it's actually really simple. And the power of herbs are to help keep our cells as healthy as they can for as long as we're alive. Our quality of life is so much better when we are taking care of ourselves, when our nutrition is good, when we're reducing our toxic load, when we're sleeping, and when we are taking advantage of what we would have been eating every day for millions of years,
Yeah.
and we don't anymore. And so, looking at them as just part of our nutrient intake versus something supplemental. It's a different form of getting them since we're not foraging all over the earth, traveling from one place to the other when it gets hot or cold. It really is just part of a healthy lifestyle, is taking advantage of these herbs, these plants that have these medicinal properties. And so it's not something to be scared of. It's not a pill for every ill, but it's an addition. It's something that we're not getting at the grocery store that we need to get in another form.
Yeah. Well, I hope through writing this book that I've been able to convey that way of looking at herbs and help people make those decisions, help people feel the confidence that they need to try things out. And for folks out there that are struggling with chronic illness, it doesn't matter what your diagnosis is, it truly doesn't. All chronic illnesses are rooted in cellular stress. We have different chronic illnesses because we all pick up different microbes and different stress factors come together, and also genetics plays a role. But all chronic illnesses are rooted in cellular stress. So if you start affecting that stress, doing the herbs, sharpening up your diet, making sure you're getting plenty of sleep, being as active as you can physically, those kinds of things are going to do more to promote your recovery than anything else. 90% of recovery from any chronic illness occurs outside a doctor's office. It's really the things that you do that matter the very, very most.
I love that. And I feel like we could end there because that truly is where it's at. Before we go, can you tell us the name of your book, where to find it, and then if people want to connect with you, how would they find you?
Okay. The book is The Cellular Wellness Solution. And don't be intimidated by the size of the book. It's like 4 books in one. It's the book on that cellular wellness concept. It's a primer in herbal medicine. It's all the lifestyle things that people should be aware of. And then it's applying those principles to different kinds of problems. So it's got a lot of information. So you can find that on Amazon. You can also find out information about me at vitalplan.com. That's a company that I work with, and it's the book is there. Or good quality herbal products are there, and protocols to help people overcome chronic illnesses and things like that.
That's wonderful. What an amazing resource. And I am going to encourage everybody to purchase the book. It's truly, it's something that you will use over and over again, and it's incredibly helpful. It's science-backed, so you know you're getting solid information, and it's really, really easy to understand. It is not in any kind of medical jargon or scientific jargon. It's something that you will be able to understand and not have to go on a deep dive trying to figure out what this word means and, all of that stuff. So well written, great resource. There's targeted information for specific problems, lifestyle application. I love this book, and I'm still digging through it, and it's going to be on my shelf for years to come, and I'm not going to share it. I'm going to just buy it for people because I'm not giving it away. It's that much of a resource. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. I'm so excited to connect with you, and I am looking forward to, again, continuing to read your book and to refer people your way into your supplements, because it's helpful. It truly is helpful.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.